Ladies and gentlemen, LA Times recently put out an article all about franchise fatigue and how The Walking Dead has managed to surpass all of that. And it's a really interesting article. There's a lot of really interesting insights there about the production of The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live, as well as just franchise fatigue in general and how there's been franchises like Star Wars and other big conglomerates that have had their highlights and then their downfalls. But it goes into that specifically with The Walking Dead. And in this video, I wanted to talk about if there should be a season 2 of The Ones Who Live and my thoughts on what they should do going forward. We've only seen 3 episodes of the show, and if you've been staying off of Twitter, at least as of late, you wouldn't have seen any of the episode 4 leaks that have already happened, but we've really only on air seen 3 episodes at the time of recording this video. And as of right now, I feel like this is really set to be a miniseries. I genuinely do. I know people like Scott Gimple have said time will tell and anything could happen and all of that stuff as far as, another season of The Ones Who Live. But I don't really think that's the direction that the show is going in. I do think they are gearing up for a season 2 of some form, but I don't really know if it's going to be The Ones Who Live. I genuinely think this show's intention was to kind of serve as a replacement for the movie trilogy that they were going to do, and at least in some way, shape, or form, end the main show that we know and love for the characters like Rick Grimes and Michonne, or at least in some way give it a sound conclusion where the actors, if they didn't want to come back, they don't have to, but they could. And I think that's the direction, especially based off of this LA Times article that I read. I kind of think that's the direction that the show is going in. I think what they're going to do is make this a 6-episode miniseries like they already have so far, and then deviate and perhaps do a season 12 of sorts reunion. Another item that this article addresses is that the show is going to be around for a while. Like the franchise, The Walking Dead overall is going to be around for a while. And I could absolutely see that being the case. And that to me further solidifies why I think that this is going to go in a different direction. And I'm okay with that. As a matter of fact, at least with what we've seen so far in The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live, I don't really know how they are going to tie this into a season 2 of this show. It seems like this is more of a conduit to tell more stories in the Walking Dead universe while finishing the story of Rick and Michonne, or at least answering a lot and making us end it in a relatively satisfying way. I hope that's what they're going to do. Time will tell. We truly don't know what's going to happen. All we do know is, so far, these first 3 episodes of the show have really, really packed a punch. And it's interesting to see where it could go in the future. So no, I don't personally think there's going to be a season 2 of The Ones Who Live, but I do think we're going to see kind of a continuation of that story. Part of the reason I think that's the case is the allocation of budget you could have to a new show or a new development. That's exactly what we saw with The Ones Who Live, which got, I believe, an $83 million budget, which is pretty crazy. And if you look at something like Spider-Man No Way Home, that had a budget of $200 million. And okay, yes, they don't really compare, like at all, especially when you see Game of Thrones had a budget for episodes of like 90-something million. I know those are like crazy numbers and all of that, but the point I'm making overall is that $83 million for a Walking Dead project is a big budget, and it was approved, I'm sure, because they had a pitch for a really good show that, fans were in demand for. And if you continue to build shows that fans are in demand for, the budgets are going to be there. I think this show proved it. And yeah, I'm sure they could continue the budget for something like a season 2, especially with hype being there and all of that. But I think The Walking Dead as a franchise, and though I don't personally agree with this thing, it's the way business works. You got to remember that these shows are products. AMC is selling us something like Apple is selling an iPhone. They care about their sales. They care about who's watching these shows. You know what I mean? It's not just like, oh, let's put this out if the fans like it, blah, blah, blah. It's not like that. There's a lot of calculated decisions that go into these shows, that go into a franchise overall. I guarantee you they're trying to build up suspense for other spin-offs so they could allocate more budgets. I mean, it just makes sense. Look at what we got with these last couple spin-offs. Dead City, The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon, and The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live. All of those had really higher budgets with less of a cast, so you could allocate more to the story, more to things that it needs, like good production, good writing, good actors to tell the stories, and things like that. You could do that with spin-offs that are very, very hyper-focused. It's really hard to do that with something like The Walking Dead. And look, obviously hindsight is 2020, and something I thought that was interesting that the article pointed out is that, the show has gone through a lot of, ups and downs and all of that, but they plan on making this a multi-generational franchise. And with that in mind, that opens the door to a lot of things that their budgets can allocate towards. So with that, while I think The Walking Dead, the main show on AMC, kind of had its faults, that's due to a lot of things. When you have actors for a long time with a story that isn't fully finished, naturally the actors are going to negotiate more. They want to be pushed more. The production team sees maybe Father Gabriel is liked more by the fans, so they give more time to him and all of that stuff. I think a lot of those factors created what was a downfall to The Walking Dead. And I think that can now be alleviated knowing Robert Kirkman's source material is over. So you could tell fleshed out stories. If you wanted to go back and retell The Walking Dead and make a full faith comic book adaptation, which I think they should do in the form of something like Invincible, I think you could easily do that now because, again, hindsight's 2020. We have the full story of The Walking Dead. We don't just have like what Robert Kirkman already wrote and then you don't know what's coming. So you could do things like that. And I know I'm deviating a little bit from is The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live getting a season 2, but it kind of matters in all of this. And it's going to make the point whole in a second, trust me. So, yes, to make a really long story short, essentially, I think they are going to do like a reunion of sorts, and they are going to bring The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live into kind of like a season 12, where it furthers that war sort of story that I think we're building to in The Ones Who Live into a story with all of our survivors in the Commonwealth. Maybe it won't happen. Maybe I will eat my words in a couple days when we see episode 4, 5, and 6. You know what I mean? But I think that's ultimately where we're going. I think there's something to be said about when, Carol said to Daryl on the phone that ick came back or whatever came back. Like, you remember that? I think there's something to be said about that. We're getting more of that. We have Morgan eventually coming into the story. Who knows what the fuck is happening with Dead City? But then you look at things like Daryl Dixon and what's going on with Madame Genet or whatever her name is, with the walkers, the crazy walkers and stuff like that. That's got to have something to do with the CRM or something. You know what I mean? Like, they're all interwoven, and hearing things like what I heard at the early screening of how they've planted seeds in all the shows for things like The Ones Who Live, just knowing that, I think they're planting seeds for a much larger story that's kind of going to be, and we're already seeing it happen, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And while I don't like that, because things like this LA Times article point out that they're building a franchise with multi-generational stories in mind and all of that, well, look how that served things like the MCU. Look how that served the Star Wars franchise and many other franchises along the way. Those are all kind of dog shit now. You know what I mean? That scares me because we've already had dog shit in The Walking Dead's universe. I've hoped they've learned their lesson from the shit shows we've got in this universe, but I'm not fully convinced yet, even though these past 3 spinoffs, whether it was Dead City, Daryl Dixon, or The Ones Who Live, they've made me trust the production team and, Scott Gimple again overall. But this is just a small sliver of time in what seems to be a multi-generational storytelling plan that AMC has because they know The Walking Dead is their bread and butter. While that does scare me because at some point things are going to fall again, even though we're in a high right now, I am excited to see where it goes. And no, I don't necessarily think we're going to get a season 2, and we might. You might look back in this video in a year's time or even a couple months' time and laugh at me. That's fine. I hope I laugh at myself. But I don't really want a season 2, and I don't think that's where they're going with this story. I think they're setting up a bigger story, which will give the actors and actresses a little bit of free time to make a decision for themselves whether they want to come back or not. We'll see. Time will tell, but the answer is definitely in front of us that they are building a much larger Walking Dead story. So don't expect the end to The Walking Dead anytime soon. And as much as that kind of disappoints me, because I want a conclusion to this main story, I do agree with the general direction that this franchise is too big to just stop. So they're going to tell more stories in the universe. That does excite me to an extent. And it is cool for me as a content creator of things like The Walking Dead to be able to tell more stories and all of that. But, you know, we're past the point of no return where it's going to be something like the Breaking Bad universe. You know what I mean? We're not going to have a perfectly knit bow like that. It's just not going to happen for us Walking Dead fans. There's more to come, and that's exciting, but also a curse. It's kind of like what Major General Beale said to Rick in season 1, episode 3 of The Ones Who Live, where it's like Rick is both the poison and the cure. That's exactly how I feel for the Walking Dead franchise right now. The point, at its core, I'm very, very, very excited for these back half episodes of The Ones Who Live and to see where that story goes. So I hope you join me along the way of these stories. And with all that out of the way, thank you so much for watching this video. And until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Peace out.